Welcome back, everybody. Well, guess what? It's raining again. We can't seem to get away from it. It seems like every other day it's raining, and it's not coming a little sprinkle. It's putting down an inch or 2 or 3 at a time. So it's been a little aggravating, but hey, what do you do? Well, if you've ever built a house before, you know when you get it to the framing stage and you've just got your roof deck on, and you don't have anything covering it up, you're just sort of on pins and needles ready for a roof to go on. So even though I've got the zip system on the roof deck, I'm still getting water coming through, and they've, you know, every seam's taped, but still getting water coming through it. As much rain as we've had, I don't say it could keep from it. But today I've got a metal company just a county or so up the road. They're gonna bring me my materials to put some metal on the roof. Now I've decided to go with a standing seam metal roof. From a metal option, I just like it better because you don't have any exposed fasteners, but it's a little more pricey, and I'll cover that here in a little while. We'll go over the difference between just a standard rib metal versus standing seam. But instead of them making it at the factory and then bringing it here, you know, unloading it and then be sitting here, they're actually going to bring their machine and actually roll the metal off here on site. That way we don't take a chance on it getting scratched up and shipping. So they got quite a bit of metal to roll off, but I've already approved a cut list for them for the house and this garage. But they're supposed to come today, and at least we'll have some materials laying on the ground, and hopefully we can get the rain to stop here in a day or two, and we can start putting the metal on the roof.
400 feet, I could haul 3,500 foot coils on this.
Really?
Yeah, too. I can haul 7,000 feet.
So there's our metal roof in a roll. And there's where it makes the magic happen, right?
Yeah, buddy.
All right, they got all the metal for the house rolled off. They're working on the garage now. These guys have been here about an hour and 45 minutes so far. I'd say another hour, they'll be out of here. It's amazing, it starts out in a roll, and it runs its course. Basically creating a tongue and a groove and a nailing flange all in one pass. And then obviously we've got the striations here in the middle to just strengthen the panel. Well, I've got a floor full of metal. Now I just need somebody to come put it on for me. But I think I've got that handled. There's a guy supposed to be coming Monday, and they're going to start on the garage, try to put it on first, and then they'll move over to the house. But hopefully the weather will cooperate and they can get up here and work. But we had a good dry day today, and tomorrow I think it's supposed to be dry, but Sunday they're calling for rain again. Hopefully the weatherman's wrong and we can get a few dry days here tied together so they can get around here and work, not be wading in the mud. Now I was saying earlier that I've got the zip system on the roof, And I like that product. The surface of it's watertight. Seems like it keeps the water, you know, shed off. But your weak point, I think, obviously, is your tape. Now, I don't know if those guys didn't roll all those joints down, didn't get them down tight, but I'm still getting some water, you know, in which we've had tremendous amounts of rain, but I'm still getting water, you know, in places coming in the house and the garage. And for me to go in there and try to figure out the piece of tape that's leaking, I elected to go ahead and put the felt down over it. And that's a synthetic felt that'll go down under that metal. And then this is a version of ice and water shield. I've got 2 valleys up on the front, but for the cost of that material, in which I don't think I'll have any problems with water getting in, but with what little bit of water I'm getting coming in there, knowing my luck, this would leak right over where that's leaking. So for another $800-900, I'd rather be safe than sorry. Now, by no means am I a roofer or claim to know anything about roofing. The only thing I know about roofs pretty much is, hey, I want to put them down flat and don't want water to go through them. So anyway, that's about the extent of my roofing knowledge. But obviously, when you're putting a roof on a house, it's a big decision. It's a big investment. So you hopefully, you know, can do your homework and guess right. But this is not a video about, hey, how you put a roof on or what kind of material you need to use, but just my approach on how I decided to go with what I did. Basically, when I picked the roof out for this garage and that house, I used 2 factors to determine it. One was the aesthetics. What kind of look do you want? Kristen and I both had agreed upon we wanted a metal roof to go on the house and the garage. So that was pretty easy. So from a metal standpoint around here, traditionally in the residential world, you'll see the rib metal or you'll see standing seam. So I know there's some other options out there now. You can get the metal shingle roofs and get other options. But with the style of house that we're going with, we knew the metal was going to be the way we would go, and I was going to have to pick between those 2. Now in my area, if you look at houses with metal roofs, 9 out of 10 times you're going to see a house with this rib metal on it versus the standing seam. So I'd say it's easily 90% you'll see the rib metal versus the standing seam. And you ask yourself, well, why is that the case? And I think the answer is pretty simple. It comes down to money. Now, as I said before, I hope I die in this place. So I hope I can live here for a long time. So I sort of moved the financial side of it to last on the list. And I just think sometimes if you're looking at something strictly from a financial standpoint, you may not always pick the right option. So I had 2 options that we were going to go with. We were going to go with this metal, the rib metal, or we're going to go with the standing seam. And then that's where it came in to where I started looking at longevity. Now, predominantly around here, this rib metal comes in a 29 gauge metal, and the residential standing seam is usually a 26. Now you can opt and go on up to a 24 gauge, but in this case, going over a solid surface, I figured the 26 gauge was going to be plenty strong enough. And plus, I had them basically put those striations in it, so that really stiffens that panel up a lot, and it helps a lot with oil canning once it gets on the roof. And if you don't know what oil canning is, a lot of times if you drive by a house and sun hits it just right, every little dimple, every little twist that metal's got in it, you'll see those shadow lines. And by having these striations in it, it sort of helps with that. Now, the only other thing that I did do different is, you know, here in recent times, they've came out, all this metal, if you can look, which this has been laying out in the dirt, but that's got a shine to it. And then if you look over here to this, it's sort of got a matte finish. So I didn't really want all that reflection coming off the roof, so that's the reason I went with a matte finish. But the main determining factor on picking this over this is, I don't know if the light will allow, but if you look at this building over here that I've built, I will guarantee you there is 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 screws. I don't know how many screws is up there. There's a lot. But there's, let's just say there's 3,000 screws in that roof. I've got 3,000 holes in my roof, and I'm depending on that little bitty rubber washer to keep that thing from leaking. So I know there's been a lot of debate on where you position your screws. Do you put them down here in the valleys, or do you put them up here in the rib? And I'll tell you, when they built that building, the company that I bought it from instructed the guys that built it to put them in the valley. They did not want the screws in the rib. Now, in my opinion, all your water for the most part is going to be down here. I'm sure there's a good reason why they don't want them here, but looks like to me it'd be less likely to leak up here than it would be down here. Now, if somebody knows the magical answer to that, I'd appreciate you put it down in the comments, because I'd like a little clarity on it, on why you would put it down here where the water is versus up here where you got a very small area here to collect water for that rain to go down in. You'd be, you know, from here to here running down the rib, but I don't know the difference. But here's the reason I went with this. When this is installed, there will be no exposed fasteners anywhere on this roof outside of some of the edges out here where some of the trim gets a pop rivet and gets trimmed out. But this has a nailing flange on it, and so this will get screwed down, and this is essentially, let's just call this the tongue, and then you've got the groove on this side. So it will basically, once this is screwed down, the next piece, that groove will come down, lock over this and secure this panel, and then we'll come on over 16 more inches and we'll keep right on trucking. But you don't have any screws that'll be exposed in this panel, so any water that hits it, it's gonna have a hard time working its way back down under this. I mean, it's just gonna have a hard time getting under it. So that's the reason I ended up going with this versus that. Now, hopefully they'll get to start on Monday, and so when they start running some trim and start tying some of this stuff together, I'll get up there and sort of video some examples, and I'll stick it in another video. But for this one, I'm basically talking on why I picked that, and then I guess the $1,000,000 question is, how much more is standing seam versus the rib metal? Now, I usually don't like to quote prices on here because obviously YouTube goes worldwide and times change, but this, I'm in East Tennessee, Southeast, and this is, you know, middle part of 2023, so take it for what you will. But I got a couple different companies to quote me prices on metal, and so the company that I ended up not using, they accidentally quoted the material on the rib metal versus the standing seam. So I actually got a quote from them for the rib metal and the standing seam, so I had a good comparison. Companies, the two companies that I checked, actually three companies, everybody was pretty close on the price when it came to the roof, so it wasn't a big drastic difference. I ended up going with a company that I did just because when I called that salesman, the guy knew what he was talking about. When I asked him a question, he gave me an answer, and that's the reason I ended up going with them. And I'll tell you, I'll put their name and number, I'll stick a picture of their truck on here. It's got their website, but they've got some pretty cool stuff. When I went up to their factory, they've got a showroom, and they've actually got a house built inside it that shows off their products. It's a pretty cool place. You ought to go in there and check their website out, but they're actually designing metal houses now to where they'll basically design your house, build all your metal panels for your walls, your trusses, the whole 9 yards, ship it out, and you screw it together. But check it out. So for the rib metal, the quote I got for a 40 by 50 garage, a 42 by 56 house, and then I've got a 14 by 16 breezeway. For the metal and trim, 8,000 bucks. Now this one sort of hurts my feelings to tell you what this cost, but for the same package, the metal, trim, fasteners, the same as the rib metal, 20,000 bucks. So in 2023 in East Tennessee, right now the materials for a standing seam roof will cost you 2.5 times what a rib metal roof will cost. Now, is it worth it? Yeah, I don't know. I think it is, and that's the reason I spent $20,000 buying it. But there's metal roofs out here that rib metal's been out for years and they're not having any problems with leaking. But like I say, I hope to die here, so that's the reason I chose one, aesthetically, I like it a little better. And then two, I like the fact that there's no holes in it. So you probably sitting there going, well, Travis, you're still gonna have to punch a hole through it to get your vents out. I'm actually not gonna put any holes in it. So we've got some pretty high gables, and with the county here, I can get by with bringing my vents out and the gables up high. So that's the way we're gonna get around that. But my goal is to not have a hole in it anywhere. And so that's the plan. Now, the one other aspect of this that I've not mentioned is actually the labor to put this on. This rib metal is a lot less labor intensive than the standing seam. On this standing seam, down at the bottom, and I don't know all the terminology for their trims, but it'll have a drip edge that goes out over the fascia, and then they have to basically cut this and basically bend a hem back under. So when this roof goes up on, when the metal goes on the roof, it actually slides and locks up in that trim piece out on the end of the roof line. So they've got to do that, and then to trim it out up on the ridges, there's some more trim work that goes into the standing seam. So when you look at it from a labor standpoint, it's going to be probably cost you more in labor to put the standing seam on than the rib metal as well. So that 2.5 time difference probably going to be 3 times or a little more going with standing seam over the rib metal. Well, hopefully this helps somebody that's out there. Maybe you're wanting to know the difference between the two and don't want to call somebody out to get a quote. Maybe this will give you an idea of the difference between the two metals. But that rib metal, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them out there that are not leaking. So I'd say you put either roof on and you'd be just fine. Some may say you're an idiot for spending that much more money on a roof. You'd probably be right. But anyway, the way I look at it, you go with your gut, put on what's gonna make you happy, and the way I look at it, whoever's signing the check, they're the only vote that counts. But anyway, we got a long way to go. We are going to put a metal board and batten siding on this house, along with a probably 3-foot wainscoting stone on the bottom. So we got that to come, but hopefully we can get dried in here next week, and it'll make Travis feel a whole lot better. But we got a lot of work to go. But if you want to follow along, be glad to take you. Until next time, we'll see you later. And one other thing real quick, to Roy and Rylan who ran that metal off for me yesterday, if you watch this video, I want you to know I appreciate it. It's pretty refreshing when somebody shows up when they say they will and do a good job. So I appreciate it.